hands. Everyone wants to stand. I roll in my jag. Fast like the wind. Everybody's on the board. Roll to the streets. I'm the man with the plan. Got the world in my hands. Every woman wants to stand. I roll in my jag. Fast like the wind.
Welcome to the world of J-Cat Adventures. Jay Bahari is the creative mind behind J-Cat, a dark, handsome, and irresistibly charming playboy who knows his way around the world's most elite circles. He's a man of adventure, romance, and intrigue, living a life most could only dream of. Beneath the tailored suits, fast cars, and high society allure lies a purpose that drives him to protect the vulnerable and bring justice to those without a voice. Dive into the captivating magic of J-Cat Adventures and discover ebooks, print editions, and audiobooks tailored for those who crave romance, suspense, and a touch of classic drama. Through each episode, you'll experience heart-stopping escapades, luxurious settings, and captivating romances that whisk you to distant lands, all woven into J-Cat's thrilling life. So, subscribe, tune in, and join our community of fans who share your love for stories that blend elegance with danger and heroism with passion. Whether you're a wanderlust soul, a romantic at heart, or just love a great adventure, J-Cat Adventures is here to awaken your spirit for excitement, justice, and unrelenting romance.
J-Cat's on the mic, bringing heat to the street when it comes to the lanes. I'm smooth like silk, but don't get it twisted.
Hi, I am the AI. Narrator Gregory for Jay Bahari. Let's go. The First Lady of Power. In a world where power and prejudice collide, a woman rises, determined to break the ultimate glass ceiling and become the first female president of her country. Her name is Eleanor Stanton, a brilliant, charismatic leader who embodies the hope of millions. But in the shadows, forces of bigotry and fear conspire against her, driven by the deep-seated racism and sexism that have plagued the nation for generations. As Eleanor's campaign gains momentum, the threats against her life grow more severe. Her message of equality and justice has ignited both passionate support and dangerous opposition. Extremist groups, political rivals, and dark money-funded operatives see her as a threat to the status quo, and they will stop at nothing to ensure she never reaches the Oval Office. The stakes have never been higher. The country teeters on the brink of chaos, and with each passing day, Eleanor's safety becomes more uncertain. The powers that be realize they need someone extraordinary to protect her, someone who can navigate the treacherous waters of political intrigue and defend her against enemies both foreign and domestic. Enter J-Cat, the enigmatic international agent known for his unmatched skill, unwavering resolve, and a presence that commands respect. A man haunted by his own past, J-Cat is no stranger to the darker side of human nature. His reputation as a no-nonsense operative precedes him, and his track record speaks volumes. He's a man who gets the job done, no matter the cost. The call to protect Eleanor Stanton isn't just another assignment for J-Cat, it's a mission that resonates deeply with him. Having seen the horrors of discrimination and the consequences of hatred firsthand, J-Cat is driven by a personal vendetta against the forces that seek to oppress and destroy. The death of Camille, a woman he loved and lost, still lingers in his heart, fueling his relentless pursuit of justice. As J-Cat takes on the role of Eleanor's protector, he finds himself thrust into a world of political machinations, media scrutiny, and covert operations. He must navigate a landscape where enemies wear many faces, from the polished smiles of political insiders to the masked extremists who lurk in the shadows. Every move he makes could mean the difference between Eleanor's survival and the nation's descent into turmoil. J-Cat's journey is one of both external and internal battles. He must confront his own demons while safeguarding Eleanor's life, balancing the line between protector and warrior. The weight of the nation's hopes rests on his shoulders as he uncovers plots, foils assassination attempts, and outmaneuvers those who seek to undermine Eleanor's campaign. But J-Cat isn't just fighting to protect a presidential candidate, he's fighting for a future where equality isn't just a dream but a reality. Eleanor Stanton represents more than just a political figure, she embodies the promise of a new era, one where the barriers of race and gender no longer hold sway. As the final days of the campaign approach, the threats intensify, culminating in a showdown that will test J-Cat's resolve like never before. In a world where trust is a luxury and betrayal lurks at every corner, J-Cat must rely on his instincts, his allies, and his unyielding determination to ensure that the First Lady of Power ascends to her rightful place. The battle for the future of a nation is fought not only in the corridors of power but in the shadows where heroes like J-Cat stand between hope and destruction. It's a story of courage, sacrifice, and the unwavering belief that one person can make a difference in the face of overwhelming odds. Eleanor Stanton, Lady of Power. Eleanor Stanton never imagined that her candidacy for the presidency would spark a battle for the soul of the nation. A lifelong advocate for equality, justice, and the rights of all citizens, she entered the race with a vision for a better future, a future where the color of one's skin or gender would no longer determine their place in society. But as her campaign gained traction, it became evident that not everyone was ready to embrace that future. The backlash was swift and vicious. Racist and sexist rhetoric, once confined to the fringes of society, surged to the forefront of public discourse. Hate groups, emboldened by the anonymity of the internet and the rhetoric of divisive leaders, began to organize with a singular goal: to stop Eleanor Stanton by any means necessary. The threats against her life were no longer just idle talk, they were real, tangible dangers that could strike at any moment. The nation's security agencies were stretched thin, unable to fully protect Eleanor as the threats against her escalated. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, the powers that be turned to a man who operated outside the usual channels, a man with a reputation for getting the job done, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. That man was J-Cat. J-Cat was a legend in the world of covert operations. An international agent who had worked in the most dangerous corners of the globe, he was known for his ability to blend in, to anticipate threats before they materialized, and to neutralize those threats with ruthless efficiency. But J-Cat was more than just a soldier or a spy. He was a man with a deep sense of justice, driven by a personal code that set him apart from others in his line of work. His decision to take on the task of protecting Eleanor Stanton wasn't made lightly. For J-Cat, this was more than just a job, it was a chance to right the wrongs that had plagued him for years. The memory of Camille, a woman he loved and lost to the same forces of hatred and intolerance, was a constant presence in his mind. Camille's death had left a void in his heart, one that he filled with a relentless drive to fight against the darkness that had taken her from him. From the moment J-Cat stepped into Eleanor's world, it was clear that this was no ordinary assignment. The threats were multifaceted, coming from both organized groups and individuals driven by their own twisted ideologies. Political rivals sought to discredit her, manipulating the media to turn public opinion against her. Extremists plotted attacks that would not only end her life but send a chilling message to anyone who dared to follow in her footsteps. J-Cat's approach was methodical. He didn't just react to threats, he anticipated them, uncovering plots before they could be executed. He employed a combination of surveillance, intelligence gathering, and psychological warfare to keep Eleanor safe, all while maintaining the facade of a calm, controlled protector. But beneath that exterior, J-Cat was always on edge, knowing that one mistake could cost Eleanor her life and the country its chance at a brighter future. As J-Cat worked tirelessly to protect Eleanor, he found himself drawn to her cause. She wasn't just a politician seeking power, she was a woman of integrity, driven by a genuine desire to make the world a better place. Her courage in the face of overwhelming odds inspired J-Cat, reminding him of why he had chosen this life in the first place. Protecting Eleanor became more than a mission, it became a personal crusade, one that reignited the fire in his soul. The enemies they faced were formidable, ranging from domestic terrorists to corrupt political operatives with deep connections. Each threat required J-Cat to dig deeper into his arsenal of skills, employing tactics he hadn't used in years. He infiltrated secret meetings, planted disinformation to throw their adversaries off balance, and even went undercover to extract crucial information that would keep Eleanor safe. But the more J-Cat uncovered, the more he realized just how deep the conspiracy against Eleanor ran. It wasn't just about stopping a woman from becoming president, it was about preserving a system that had long been rigged in favor of those in power. The enemies Eleanor faced weren't just bigots or extremists, they were the gatekeepers of a corrupt system that feared change more than anything. As the campaign reached its climax, the pressure on J-Cat intensified. The threats became more direct, the attacks more coordinated. Eleanor's opponents, realizing they couldn't defeat her in the public arena, resorted to their most desperate measures yet. Assassination plots were uncovered, each more elaborate than the last, and J-Cat found himself in a race against time to prevent them. In the final days leading up to the election, J-Cat and Eleanor faced their greatest challenge yet. A coalition of powerful enemies, united by their fear of Eleanor's potential victory, launched an all-out assault, aiming to destroy her once and for all. But they underestimated J-Cat's resolve. He was a man on a mission, and he would not let the forces of hatred and oppression win. Eleanor Stanton's rise to prominence was meteoric, a testament to her brilliance and determination. A woman of profound intellect and unwavering moral conviction, she had spent years championing the causes of the marginalized and oppressed, fighting for policies that uplifted the downtrodden and dismantled the systemic barriers that held so many back. Her candidacy for president was the culmination of a lifetime of service, a beacon of hope for those who believed in a more just and equitable society. But with that hope came fear. Fear from those who saw Eleanor's vision for the future as a threat to their own power and privilege. Her opponents were not just political rivals, they were the entrenched forces of an old order that had long thrived on inequality, exclusion, and the subjugation of those they deemed inferior. These forces, fueled by racism and sexism, had no intention of allowing Eleanor to succeed. As her campaign gained traction, the atmosphere around Eleanor grew increasingly hostile. The opposition was relentless, employing smear campaigns, disinformation, and dog whistles to rally those who feared change. But what began as underhanded tactics soon escalated into something far more sinister. JCat was an enigma, a ghost in the world of espionage and covert operations. His real name was known to only a few, and his past was a mystery, shrouded in rumors and half-truths. Some said he had been a soldier, others a spy. What was certain was that he was a master of his craft, a man who had spent his life moving through the world's most dangerous circles with lethal efficiency. He had seen the worst of humanity, and yet he remained undeterred, driven by a code that set him apart from the mercenaries and hired guns who often crossed his path. The closer Eleanor got to securing the nomination, the more desperate her enemies became. The assassination attempts grew bolder, more sophisticated. They tried to poison her, to stage accidents, and to incite riots at her rallies. But JCat was always there, a silent guardian who foiled their plans time and again. His presence was felt but rarely seen, a shadow that kept Eleanor safe as she continued her journey toward the presidency. In the midst of this high-stakes battle, JCat found himself forging an unexpected bond with Eleanor. She was not just a figurehead to be protected, she was a person of immense strength and courage, someone who, despite the constant danger, never wavered in her commitment to her cause. Eleanor saw in JCat not just a protector, but a kindred spirit, someone who understood the sacrifices that came with standing up for what was right. Their partnership was one of mutual respect and shared purpose. Eleanor's unwavering belief in a better future reignited something in JCat that he thought he had lost, a sense of hope, a belief that the fight was worth it, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Together, they faced down every challenge, drawing strength from each other as they confronted the darkest elements of society. As election day approached, the threats against Eleanor reached a fever pitch. Her enemies, realizing they could not defeat her in the court of public opinion, resorted to their final, most dangerous plan yet. A coordinated attack was set in motion, involving multiple groups working in tandem to ensure that Eleanor would never live to see the inside of the Oval Office. As the nation celebrates its first woman president, JCat slips back into the shadows, his job done for now but always ready for the next battle. He leaves behind a legacy of courage and sacrifice, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are those who will stand up and fight for what is right. The media, traditionally seen as the fourth estate, a guardian of democracy, has, in this battle, become a weapon for those who wish to see President Eleanor fail. Owned by a handful of conglomerates, these media outlets have long traded objectivity for profit, sensationalism for truth. They weave narratives designed to sow doubt, stoke fear, and undermine President Eleanor's credibility. Day after day, they bombard the public with misleading headlines, skewed stories, and opinion pieces masquerading as news. The goal is clear, to erode President Eleanor's support base and turn public opinion against her. Behind the scenes, big money wields its influence with ruthless efficiency. Billionaire donors and corporate lobbyists, terrified of the regulatory changes and economic reforms President Eleanor promises, pour vast sums into dark money groups. These organizations, with no transparency or accountability, flood the airwaves with attack ads, finance opposition campaigns, and buy politicians who will do their bidding. They use their financial clout to twist legislation, ensuring that their interests are protected, and their profits remain untouched. But their involvement goes deeper still. Big money and the media work in tandem, coordinating smear campaigns and orchestrating scandal after scandal, all designed to derail Eleanor's presidency. They pay off whistleblowers to fabricate stories, plant false evidence, and manipulate public records. They create fake grassroots movements to give the illusion of widespread opposition, manufacturing dissent where there is none. These shadowy forces are relentless because they understand what is at stake. President Eleanor's rise to power represents a threat not just to their wealth, but to their ability to shape the country's future according to their own interests. They are the gatekeepers of the old world order, and they will not go quietly into the night. JCat, ever vigilant, understands that these forces are perhaps the most dangerous of all. They don't operate with guns and bombs but with influence and deception, using their vast resources to manipulate the very fabric of society. As he digs deeper into the threats against President Eleanor, J-Cat uncovers the extent of this conspiracy, a web of corruption that connects the highest levels of government, media, and industry. J-Cat knows that to protect President Eleanor, he must do more than just shield her from physical harm. He must expose these forces for what they truly are. It's not enough to stop an assassination, he must dismantle the very mechanisms of power that allow such corruption to flourish. He embarks on a covert campaign of his own, using his skills to infiltrate these organizations, gather evidence, and bring their machinations to light. The task is Herculean, and the risks are enormous. J-Cat is up against opponents who have virtually limitless resources, and who are willing to destroy anyone who gets in their way. But he is driven by a deep sense of justice, a belief that truth and integrity can still triumph in a world that seems increasingly dominated by greed and lies. The media ramps up its attacks, big money doubles down on its efforts to buy influence, and the tension across the nation reaches a boiling point. But J-Cat, with his unmatched resolve and strategic brilliance, begins to turn the tide. He leaks incriminating documents to trusted journalists, exposes corrupt officials, and systematically dismantles the alliances that have long protected these shadowy forces. In the final act, just as it seems that the tide might turn against President Eleanor for good, J-Cat's efforts bear fruit. A massive expose breaks, revealing the extent of the collusion between big money, the media, and political operatives. The public, awakened to the reality of the manipulation they've been subjected to, rallies behind President Eleanor with renewed vigor. The corrupt media empires face a backlash unlike anything they've seen, and the dark money networks are thrust into the spotlight, their influence finally curtailed. President Eleanor's intelligence and strategic mind have always been her greatest assets. Throughout her career, she has outmaneuvered opponents in debates, navigated complex legislative battles, and built coalitions that seemed impossible. But what her enemies never realized was that her capabilities extended far beyond the political arena. Behind her calm demeanor and composed public image, President Eleanor harbored a secret that only a few close confidants knew. She had trained extensively in combat, mastering techniques that made her not just a figurehead but a warrior in her own right. J-Cat, brought in to protect President Eleanor from the myriad threats against her, had initially seen her as someone who needed his protection. His expertise in dealing with danger made him invaluable, but he never expected that President Eleanor would surprise him. Used to dealing with powerful but ultimately vulnerable clients, J-Cat was taken aback when he discovered that President Eleanor was not just capable of defending herself, she was a highly skilled combatant. The revelation came during a particularly tense moment, when a group of assassins sent by the shadowy cabal orchestrating the campaign against President Eleanor broke through the first line of security. J-Cat, ever vigilant, was prepared to neutralize the threat, but before he could act, President Eleanor moved with a speed and precision that left him momentarily stunned. In a matter of seconds, she had disarmed one attacker and incapacitated another, her movements fluid and efficient, honed by years of training. President Eleanor's combat skills had been developed in secret, a necessity born of the countless threats she had faced throughout her career. She had learned that in a world dominated by those who would stop at nothing to maintain power, one could not rely solely on others for protection. Her intelligence and cunning had guided her through the political landscape, but it was her physical prowess that had kept her alive in the shadows. For J-Cat, this discovery changed everything. He had always respected President Eleanor for her intellect and her leadership, but now he saw her in a new light. She was not just a target to be protected, she would be a partner in the fight for justice, someone who could stand and support him in the most dangerous situations. This realization deepened the bond between them, as J-Cat came to understand that President Eleanor was not merely the embodiment of an ideal but a warrior who was ready to fight for her vision. President Eleanor's combat skills became a critical asset as the threats against her escalated. The forces in the shadows, realizing that their traditional methods of intimidation and attack would not work, began to adapt their strategies. They sent more skilled operatives, assassins trained in the art of killing, hoping to catch President Eleanor off guard. But time and again, they underestimated her. In one particularly dramatic confrontation, J-Cat and President Eleanor found themselves cornered, leaving an important speech, surrounded by a team of elite mercenaries sent to end her life. The mercenaries, confident in their numbers and their training, moved in for the kill. But as they closed in, they were met with a force they hadn't anticipated. President Eleanor, alongside J-Cat, fought with a ferocity and skill that left the attackers reeling. It was in that moment that J-Cat realized just how formidable his charge truly was. This newfound understanding altered the dynamics of their relationship. No longer was J-Cat simply the protector, he became a trusted ally, someone who could work in tandem with President Eleanor to outthink and outfight her enemies. Together, they devised strategies that played to their strengths, blending J-Cat's experience in espionage and combat with President Eleanor's rise to power. It became an unstoppable partnership, a force not accounted for. As the story unfolds, the revelation of President Eleanor's combat skills and her ability to defend herself becomes a key turning point. The shadowy forces realize that they are not just up against the first woman president, they are facing a warrior who is as skilled in the art of war as she is in the art of politics. This forces them to rethink their entire strategy, as they come to understand that President Eleanor is not a figurehead to be manipulated or eliminated easily. She is a formidable adversary who will not go down without a fight. The realization of President Eleanor Stanton's combat prowess sends shockwaves through the ranks of those who conspired to bring her down. The masterminds behind the shadowy network of power brokers and media moguls had expected to deal with a candidate who, while formidable in debate and policy, would be easily crushed by their orchestrated attacks. Instead, they find themselves confronting a leader who is not only intellectually superior but physically capable of defending herself with lethal efficiency. The surprise President Eleanor delivers to both her enemies and allies alike changes the game entirely. For the shadowy cabal, this new revelation forces them to reconsider their approach. They had banked on overwhelming her with sheer force, assuming that she would rely entirely on her security detail, headed by the elite J-Cat, to protect her from harm. Now, they have to account for the fact that Eleanor is not a passive player in this deadly game. She is an active combatant, someone who can turn the tables on her attackers with her own hands. In private meetings, the conspirators debate how to neutralize this unexpected threat. Their traditional methods, intimidation, manipulation, assassination, suddenly seem less certain. They send in their best operatives, highly trained mercenaries and assassins who have never failed a mission. But even they find themselves outmatched by a target who combines the mind of a tactician with the skills of a warrior. The impact of President Eleanor's combat abilities is felt not just in direct confrontations, but in the psychological warfare that ensues. Every attempt on her life that fails due to her own intervention demoralizes her enemies and emboldens her supporters. Her reputation grows beyond that of a politician. She becomes a symbol of resilience, someone who can withstand the worst the world can throw at her and emerge unscathed. This shift in perception sends waves through the electorate, as voters see in her the strength and determination they crave in a leader. For J-Cat, this transformation in their dynamic is both challenging and inspiring. He has spent his career protecting those who could not protect themselves, relying on his exceptional skills and experience to keep his charges safe. Discovering that President Eleanor can match him in combat is both humbling and exhilarating. It forces him to rethink his approach, not as a protector alone, but as a partner in a shared mission. J-Cat begins to see President Eleanor as more than just a leader he must defend. She becomes a comrade in arms. Together, they develop a synergy that their enemies cannot anticipate. J-Cat's instincts, honed through years of espionage and combat, are complemented by President Eleanor's strategic brilliance and her ability to think several steps ahead. They form a plan to not just survive but to strike back at the forces arrayed against them. This partnership becomes the cornerstone of their success. While J-Cat handles the physical threats with his unmatched skill set, President Eleanor uses her combat training to keep him from having to constantly protect her, freeing him to focus on dismantling the conspiracies against her. In several key moments, it is President Eleanor's unexpected intervention that turns the tide of battle, allowing them to outmaneuver and outfight their enemies. The most dramatic of these moments occurs in a climactic showdown, where J-Cat and President Eleanor face off against the leaders of the conspiracy in a high-stakes confrontation. The setting is an opulent estate, owned by one of the billionaires who has bankrolled the entire operation against President Eleanor. It is a trap, designed to lure them into a final confrontation where the odds are overwhelmingly against them. But President Eleanor and J-Cat are ready. Armed with the knowledge they've gathered and the skills they've honed, they enter the lion's den not as prey, but as predators. The fight that ensues is brutal and fast-paced, with President Eleanor demonstrating the full extent of her combat training. Her movements are precise, her strikes deadly, as she takes down assailants who had once thought her an easy target. J-Cat, initially shocked by the ferocity with which President Eleanor fights, quickly adapts to this new dynamic. They move in perfect harmony, covering each other's weaknesses, exploiting their enemies' mistakes, and using the environment to their advantage. The conspirators, who had expected to crush President Eleanor under their collective power, are instead systematically dismantled, both physically and politically. As the dust settles, the surviving members of the conspiracy are left to face the consequences of their actions. President Eleanor, with JCAT at her side, forces them to confess their crimes, exposing the full extent of the corruption that has plagued the nation. The media, previously complicit in the cover-up, is forced to broadcast the truth to a shocked and outraged public. The sun had barely risen over the nation's capital, casting a golden glow across the stately columns of the White House, when the quiet hum of a secure phone call echoed in JCAT's ears. It had been months since JCAT had last spoken to President Eleanor Stanton, the country's first female president in a force that had forever reshaped the political landscape. His last mission had been harrowing, filled with danger and betrayal, yet rewarding as it had helped secure Eleanor's position as the leader of the free world. But JCAT had no illusions that his work for Eleanor Stanton was over. When a leader like her stood for progress and change, enemies would always be waiting in the shadows. President Stanton had been a trailblazer since the day she stepped into office. Her agenda was bold, her convictions unshakable. She was not just another politician, but a visionary who sought to reform the deeply entrenched systems that had ruled Washington for decades. But with progress came opposition, and now Capitol Hill was ablaze with quiet murmurs of dissent. Those who thrived on maintaining the status quo, the lobbyists, the power brokers, and the corrupt politicians, were not happy. And Eleanor knew she could only trust one man to uncover what was really going on behind the scenes. JCAT, the man who had once stood by her side, protecting her from threats that were more than just political. A man who could see through the facades of DC's most powerful, capable of weaving through the intricate web of lies and manipulation like no other. JCAT, I need you. President Stanton's voice came through the receiver, crisp and commanding yet tinged with an edge of urgency. Capitol Hill is turning against me. Everything we've worked for is being undermined, and I need to know who's pulling the strings. JCAT leaned back in his leather chair, his eyes narrowing. He had been lying low in the wine country, enjoying a brief respite from the dangerous assignments that had defined his career. But he knew the moment he heard Eleanor's voice that his peace was short-lived. Give me the details, he said, his voice calm and steady. The reforms I pushed for, healthcare, environmental policies, wealth redistribution, it's all been met with resistance. At first, I thought it was normal political opposition, but it's deeper than that, Eleanor explained. Bills are being killed before they even reach the floor, my allies are being blackmailed, and I suspect there's something more sinister happening behind the scenes. This isn't just politics as usual. It feels like an organized effort to destabilize my administration. JCAT sat in silence for a moment, his mind already working through the possibilities. In the world he lived in, power never came without enemies, and Eleanor had made plenty by challenging the deep-rooted systems that benefited only the few. The closer Eleanor got to securing the nomination, the more desperate her enemies became. The assassination attempts grew bolder, more sophisticated. They tried to poison her, to stage accidents, and to incite riots at her rallies. But JCAT was always there, a silent guardian who foiled their plans time and again. His presence was felt but rarely seen, a shadow that kept Eleanor safe as she continued her journey toward the presidency. In the midst of this high-stakes battle, JCAT found himself forging an unexpected bond with Eleanor. She was not just a figurehead to be protected, she was a person of immense strength and courage, someone who, despite the constant danger, never wavered in her commitment to her cause. Eleanor saw in JCAT not just a protector, but a kindred spirit, someone who understood the sacrifices that came with standing up for what was right. Their partnership was one of mutual respect and shared purpose. Eleanor's unwavering belief in a better future reignited something in JCAT that he thought he had lost, a sense of hope, a belief that the fight was worth it, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Together, they faced down every challenge, drawing strength from each other as they confronted the darkest elements of society. As election day approached, the threats against Eleanor reached a fever pitch. Her enemies, realizing they could not defeat her in the court of public opinion, resorted to their final, most dangerous plan yet. A coordinated attack was set in motion, involving multiple groups working in tandem to ensure that Eleanor would never live to see the inside of the Oval Office. As the nation celebrates its first woman president, JCAT slips back into the shadows, his job done for now but always ready for the next battle. He leaves behind a legacy of courage and sacrifice, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are those who will stand up and fight for what is right. The media, traditionally seen as the fourth estate, a guardian of democracy, has, in this battle, become a weapon for those who wish to see President Eleanor fail. Owned by a handful of conglomerates, these media outlets have long traded objectivity for profit, sensationalism for truth. They weave narratives designed to sow doubt, stoke fear, and undermine President Eleanor's credibility. Day after day, they bombard the public with misleading headlines, skewed stories, and opinion pieces masquerading as news. The goal is clear: to erode President Eleanor's support base and turn public opinion against her. JCat's skills were tested to the limit as he navigated this dangerous terrain. Along the way, he encountered old foes and new allies, but his mission remained clear: expose the network, protect the president, and ensure that the progress Eleanor Stanton fought for would not be undone. The final showdown came during a closed-door meeting at a shadowy estate on the outskirts of the city, where the real power brokers convened. JCat, disguised and ready for action, infiltrated the gathering. It was here that he discovered the full extent of the conspiracy, a coalition of wealthy elites and high-ranking politicians determined to bring down the presidency by any means necessary. But JCat was no stranger to danger. With his quick thinking, combat skills, and sharp intellect, he dismantled their operation, exposing the corruption for all to see. By the time he reported back to President Stanton, the wheels of justice had already begun to turn. Back in the Oval Office, Eleanor stood across from JCat, a sense of relief washing over her. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved this administration." JCat gave her a small nod, but his mind was already elsewhere. "They won't stop, Eleanor. You've shaken the foundation of everything they've built. But as long as you're in office, they'll keep coming for you." Eleanor smiled. "Then I'll keep fighting. And if I need you, I know you'll be there." As JCat turned to leave the Oval Office, he knew this wouldn't be the last time he'd receive a call from President Eleanor Stanton. The fight for justice was never over. But for now, they had won, and Washington would never be the same again. The steady hum of the city streets had long faded into the silence of the early morning. The world slept, but in the dimly lit halls of the White House, a phone rang, cutting through the quiet like a siren of impending trouble. It was 4 a.m. President Eleanor Stanton, the nation's first female president, jolted awake from the restless sleep that had become her nightly ritual. She reached for the phone, dread filling her chest before she even lifted the receiver. "Yes?" she answered, her voice sharp and clear despite the early hour. "Madam President," came the voice of her most trusted aide. "It's happened. The situation you feared." Eleanor's grip tightened around the phone. She had known that her enemies wouldn't wait long. She had spent months reshaping the country's policies, shaking up Capitol Hill with reforms that targeted the powerful and privileged. The backlash had been brutal, but she pressed on. Yet, here it was, knocking at her door earlier than anticipated. "Who's behind it?" she demanded, her mind already spinning with possibilities. "We don't know yet. But we need to act fast. This is bigger than we expected." There was a brief pause, and then the words Eleanor had dreaded most. "It's time to call JCat." She closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. There was no one else she trusted more to handle the situation. JCat, the man who had saved her presidency once before, who had uncovered conspiracies deep within the heart of Capitol Hill. He was a relentless force, the kind of man who could operate in the shadows and emerge victorious against even the most dangerous enemies. "I'll make the call myself," Eleanor said. The line went silent, and she sat there for a moment, gathering her thoughts. She had promised JCat that he wouldn't have to return to this chaotic world. After everything he'd done for her, after he had nearly given his life to protect her, she had sworn he could walk away. But trouble had a way of calling him back. Eleanor picked up the secure line. She dialed the number she knew by heart, the one no one else had, and waited as it rang on the other end. JCat was a man who cherished his moments of solitude. He had left Washington behind after his last mission, retreating to the wine country where the only battles he faced were with the stubborn vines that lined his estate. His nights were quiet, far removed from the dangers of political intrigue. But as his phone buzzed at the crack of dawn, a familiar unease settled over him. He reached for it, already knowing who would be on the other end. "JCat," he answered, his voice steady. "JCat, it's me," Eleanor's voice came through, combat tinged with urgency. "I need you again." There was a pause on the line. He had been waiting for this call, though he had hoped it wouldn't come so soon. He sat up, running a hand over his face as he tried to shake the remnants of sleep from his mind. "What's happened?" he asked. "Things are moving fast," Eleanor replied, her tone serious. "There's a new threat, something bigger than before. I don't have all the details yet, but it's clear that someone is trying to dismantle everything we've built. I need you to come back to DC. We have enemies working in the shadows again." JCat clenched his jaw. He had spent years fighting battles for people who couldn't fight for themselves, protecting those like Eleanor who were determined to change the world for the better. But every time he got close to stepping away for good, the past came rushing back to drag him under. "Do you trust anyone else on this?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "No," she said softly. "Only you." The silence between them hung heavy. J-Cat's mind raced, weighing his options. He could say no, leave it all behind. But Eleanor had always been different. She wasn't just another politician, she was someone who truly wanted to make a difference. And she had enemies. Powerful ones. "I'll be there by morning," he finally said, the familiar resolve settling in his chest. "Thank you, J-Cat," Eleanor breathed, relief evident in her voice. "I knew I could count on you." As the line went dead, J-Cat rose from his bed, already planning his next move. The peaceful life he had carved out for himself would have to wait. The fight wasn't over, not yet. By the time J-Cat landed in Washington, the city was stirring with the first signs of life. He moved through the familiar streets, his mind on high alert as he entered the White House once more. Eleanor was waiting for him in the Situation Room, her eyes filled with the fire he had always admired. She stood tall, poised as always, but there was an edge of worry that she couldn't hide. "We don't have much time," she said as J-Cat approached. "The intelligence we've gathered points to a coordinated effort to destabilize my presidency. There's a network of players involved, corporate interests, political power brokers, maybe even foreign agents. They're pulling strings behind the scenes, and if we don't stop them, everything we've worked for will fall apart." J-Cat nodded, already scanning the data spread across the room. "Who's at the center of it?" "That's what I need you to find out," Eleanor said, her voice steely. "They're covering their tracks, but I know you can expose them. This is bigger than last time, J-Cat. It's not just about taking me down, it's about stopping the entire movement for change." He met her gaze, his eyes narrowing with determination. "Then let's take them down." The mission was set, and once again, J-Cat plunged into the murky waters of political warfare. The streets of Washington had become his battlefield once more, and this time, the stakes were even higher. But he knew one thing for certain: no matter how deep the conspiracy ran, no matter how powerful the enemies were, he would find the truth. For Eleanor. For the country. And as long as J-Cat was on the case, there was no stopping the justice that was about to be served. J-Cat stepped out of the private elevator, deep within the belly of the White House, escorted by a Secret Service agent who had been tight-lipped since picking him up from the airport. The agent stopped in front of a heavily secured door, no markings, no indication of what lay beyond, just a single scanner embedded into the wall. After confirming J-Cat's identity with a quick retinal scan, the door slid open with a quiet hiss. "Welcome to your new command center, Mr. Cat," the agent said with a nod. J-Cat's eyes widened slightly as he stepped inside. The room was a masterpiece of cutting-edge technology and sleek design, a hidden lair fit for someone of his skill set. The walls were lined with digital screens, each displaying live feeds from surveillance networks across the country and abroad. A massive interactive map took center stage, allowing him to track threats in real time. But it wasn't just the tech that caught his attention. There was something familiar here, something that whispered of the days when his missions took him into the deepest shadows of danger. "This is impressive," J-Cat said, his voice low as he walked further into the room. "Glad you think so," came a voice from the corner. J-Cat turned to find Eleanor Stanton, the president herself, standing near a control panel, watching him with a small smile on her lips. She looked out of place in her sharp, presidential attire among the high-tech gadgets and spy-level gear, but the fire in her eyes told him she was more comfortable here than she let on. "We figured you'd need a place to operate, and I wanted to give you something worthy of your skills," Eleanor said, walking toward him. "This room is off the books, completely secure. No one knows it exists but a few trusted agents, myself included." J-Cat's gaze swept over the room again, taking in the details: the encrypted communication stations, the weapons locker subtly hidden behind a sliding panel, the advanced computing systems running constant diagnostics. "Very James Bond," J-Cat murmured with an approving nod. Eleanor smiled. "We thought you might like it. There's more, though. Follow me." She led him through a side door into a private garage that housed just one vehicle, a black Jaguar XJ220, but clearly modified. The car had all the elegance of a Jaguar, but J-Cat could tell at a glance that this was no ordinary vehicle. "This is yours," Eleanor said, running a hand along the hood of the car. It's equipped with state-of-the-art technology, armor-plated, bulletproof windows, and more hidden surprises than you'll ever need. JCat moved closer, inspecting the car with a practiced eye. He could already imagine the gadgets hidden beneath the polished surface: smoke screens, tracking devices, concealed weapons. It was as if he had stepped into a scene straight out of a spy movie. "I take it there's a way to disappear in this thing?" JCat asked, half joking. Eleanor nodded, her expression serious. "There's a cloaking device built into the exterior. If you need to go off-grid, this will make you invisible to any satellite tracking system. We've also installed a tactical escape pod, just in case." JCat let out a low whistle, clearly impressed. "You really thought of everything, didn't you?" Eleanor crossed her arms, meeting his gaze. "I don't take chances when it comes to your safety. You've already done more for this country than anyone could ask for, JCat. If you're going back into the field for me, I want to make sure you have every advantage." There was a beat of silence as JCat absorbed the gravity of her words. He had spent years working alone, relying on his instincts and his wits to survive. But this was different. He wasn't just a rogue agent anymore, he was part of something bigger, and Eleanor was making sure he had everything he needed to win the fight ahead. "Looks like I'll have no excuses if things go wrong," JCat said with a smirk, though the weight of responsibility pressed heavier on his shoulders than ever. Eleanor softened, stepping closer to him. "You've never needed an excuse, JCat. Just come back alive. That's all I ask." He met her eyes, the unspoken bond between them as strong as ever. With a slight nod, JCat turned back toward the car. He reached for the door handle, sliding into the driver's seat with a familiarity that felt natural, almost comforting. His fingers brushed over the controls, instantly recognizing the design. The engine roared to life with a purr that echoed through the garage, but this was no ordinary growl. It was the sound of power, precision, and readiness. JCat knew that the road ahead was dangerous, filled with the unknown. But now, armed with the best gadgets money and technology could buy, he was ready to face whatever the world had to throw at him. "I'll leave you to get acquainted with your new toys," Eleanor said as she stepped back, her eyes lingering on him for just a moment longer than necessary. JCat gave her a nod, his trademark smirk creeping back. "Don't worry. I'll take good care of it." As she left the garage, the door sliding shut behind her, JCat felt the thrill of the unknown course through him. With this setup, the stakes had just been raised. It wasn't just about saving the country anymore, it was about proving, once again, that no matter what gadgets they gave him, the real weapon was always him. With a final glance at the array of controls, JCat gripped the wheel and eased the car forward, the weight of the coming mission already bearing down on him. But as the garage doors opened, revealing the early morning light, he knew one thing for sure. He was back. And this time, he wasn't just playing by their rules, he was making his own. JCat's new gadgets, courtesy of President Eleanor Stanton, were not just toys, they were tools that would help him dive deeper into the murky waters of Washington politics, where corruption flowed silently beneath the surface. And in this city, there were players so deeply embedded in the system that their names were never whispered, their faces never seen, and their influence never questioned. The night was thick with tension as JCat sat behind the wheel of his new, modified Jaguar. The hum of the engine was barely audible, the sleek vehicle blending into the shadowy streets of DC thanks to its cloaking feature. He had learned, through an encrypted tip from one of his trusted sources, that a high-level meeting was taking place. But this wasn't just a political gathering, it was a summit of power brokers, the kind of gathering that wasn't on any official calendar. The tip had pointed him toward a seemingly innocuous think tank located in a quiet corner of Georgetown. On the surface, this think tank was a center for policy research, but in reality, it was a front for some of the most powerful, hidden players in the game. As JCat parked the Jaguar in an alleyway, he activated the car's surveillance drones. They slipped into the night sky, barely visible, gathering intel from the surrounding area. The images they sent back confirmed what he had suspected: high-profile senators, influential lobbyists, and several corporate magnates were attending the meeting. But it was the presence of a name that surprised even him, an old friend of President Stanton's, someone trusted in her inner circle. "This goes deeper than I thought," JCat muttered to himself, as he scanned the faces entering the building. It wasn't just enemies of the president who were involved, some of her closest allies were in on the conspiracy. With the click of a button on his watch, JCat activated his custom gear, micro-listening devices disguised as loose change, an EMP to disable any electronic surveillance in the building, and a cloaking suit that allowed him to blend into the night. He was a shadow now, a ghost moving through the heart of Washington. His plan was simple: infiltrate the building, gather the intel, and find out exactly who was pulling the strings in the attempt to destabilize the president's administration. But as always, nothing was as simple as it seemed. Once inside, he moved swiftly through the hallways, avoiding the security detail that was far too heavy for just a normal meeting. Whoever was behind this didn't just have power, they had resources. As JCat positioned himself outside the conference room, his enhanced audio equipment picked up snippets of conversation. Words like blackmail, leverage, and impeachment floated through the air like poison, confirming his worst fears. The conspiracy was bigger than he had imagined. These weren't just disgruntled politicians, they were orchestrating a complete takedown of Eleanor Stanton, using every dirty trick in the book. And then, the voice came. Cold, calm, calculated. A voice he recognized. "You've all done well to keep this quiet," the voice said. "But now it's time to move to the next phase." JCat froze as the door opened, and out stepped none other than Senator Frank Mason, one of the president's most vocal supporters. Mason had stood by Eleanor throughout her career, defending her policies, praising her leadership. And now, here he was, at the heart of the conspiracy to destroy her. JCat's mind raced. If Mason was involved, that meant the betrayal was even closer to the president than he'd feared. There were powerful forces at play, willing to stop at nothing to maintain the status quo, even if it meant taking down one of their own. But Mason wasn't the only surprise in the room. Standing next to him, dressed in a sharp suit, was a man JCat had only seen in classified files. A ghost in the intelligence community, a man known only as the Handler. He was a behind-the-scenes operative, orchestrating covert actions for decades, and now it appeared he had his sights set on controlling the White House. As the meeting continued, JCat learned the full extent of the plan. The conspiracy wasn't just about political control, it was about financial domination, ensuring that the interests of a few powerful corporations and families remained unchallenged. They were working to ensure that Eleanor Stanton's presidency would fail before it could enact real change, keeping Washington in the iron grip of shadowy elites. But JCat wasn't just here to listen. It was time to take action. In one swift move, JCat disabled the building's security systems using his EMP device. The lights flickered, the cameras shut down, and chaos ensued. He moved through the shadows like a predator, targeting the conspirators with precision. In the confusion, he confronted Mason and the Handler. The confrontation was tense, a battle of wits and words as JCat revealed what he knew. But the Handler, cool as ever, didn't flinch. He had been in worse situations and knew how to turn the tables. "We knew you'd come, JCat," the Handler said, a smile playing at his lips. "You think you've uncovered our little secret, but this game is far bigger than you could ever imagine." JCat's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." With a flick of his wrist, JCat deployed a smoke screen, disappearing into the chaos. As he slipped out of the building, the realization hit him: this was just the beginning. The players in Washington were more dangerous than ever, and if he was going to protect the president and expose the corruption, he'd need every bit of his cunning, skill, and the gadgets he'd been equipped with. Back in his Jaguar, JCat sped off into the night, the city lights reflecting in his rearview mirror. The stakes were higher now, but he was ready. There were more enemies to unmask, more shadows to expose. And as long as he had the trust of the president, he wouldn't stop until the game was over. But one thing was certain: Washington's hidden players had just met their match. And JCat wasn't going anywhere. The shadow world had a problem. And that problem was JCat. They had spent years mastering the art of manipulation, pulling strings behind the scenes in Washington, controlling politicians like marionettes, and bending the system to their will. But JCat wasn't like the others. He couldn't be bought, couldn't be coerced, and he refused to play by their rules. It began with a simple offer, a bribe. One that, to any ordinary man, would have been impossible to refuse. $10 million, JCat, the man in the tailored suit had said, his voice calm and confident. A clean deposit into any account you wish. No questions asked. All you have to do is look the other way. The offer had come from one of the Shadow World's top operatives, a man known only as Donovan. He had expected this to be easy. JCat was good, but Donovan believed everyone had a price. And when you dangled enough money in front of a man, he'd usually fold. But JCat wasn't just any man. JCat stared at Donovan, his expression unreadable. The room was silent for a moment, tension crackling in the air like a live wire. "I don't look the other way," JCat finally said, his voice low, steady. "I look right at the problem." Donovan's smirk faltered. You're serious? Dead serious. A flicker of disbelief crossed Donovan's face, but it quickly hardened into irritation. Everyone takes the deal, J-Cat. Everyone. You're making a mistake. J-Cat leaned in, his piercing gaze locked on Donovan's. I don't make mistakes. I make decisions. And I've decided your offer doesn't interest me. With that, J-Cat walked out, leaving Donovan in stunned silence. The shadow world wasn't used to hearing no. It rattled them. In their eyes, J-Cat's refusal wasn't just a rejection of their offer, it was an insult. And they didn't take insults lightly. Within days, J-Cat became their prime target. But what they didn't understand was that J-Cat didn't just operate outside the system, he played by his own rules. And now, he had his sights set on dismantling the shadow world piece by piece. J-Cat moved swiftly, methodically, with precision that rivaled any of Washington's most elite operatives. He wasn't about to let the corruption fester any longer. Armed with his new White House gadgets, state-of-the-art technology, and an unbreakable will, he began hunting the players in the shadow world, one by one. His first target was an international banker named Matteo Ravelli, a man who had funneled money through shell corporations to influence U.S. elections for years. Ravelli lived in a penthouse in Manhattan, guarded by layers of security. But J-Cat didn't need an invitation. He hacked Ravelli's security system, slipping past guards and alarms like a ghost. By the time Ravelli realized what was happening, J-Cat was already standing in his office, waiting. You can't hide behind your money anymore, J-Cat said coolly, pulling out a USB device loaded with incriminating data on Ravelli's operations. I'm shutting you down. Ravelli panicked, offering J-Cat anything, money, influence, protection. But J-Cat wasn't interested. He left the USB on the desk, walked out, and within hours, Ravelli's empire began to crumble. Next, J-Cat turned his attention to a lobbyist named Sandra Milton, a woman who had used her connections to strong-arm Congress into passing laws that only benefited the ultra-wealthy. She had never been touched by scandal until J-Cat started digging. With stealth and expertise, J-Cat uncovered her deepest secrets, from backdoor deals to offshore accounts. He exposed her for what she truly was, a puppet of the shadow world, pulling strings for her own profit. Her political career, and her carefully curated reputation, disintegrated overnight. As J-Cat continued his takedown, the shadow world became desperate. They couldn't understand why J-Cat wouldn't accept their bribes, why he didn't want their power, their influence. To them, J-Cat was an anomaly, someone who refused to play the game. But J-Cat wasn't interested in their game. He had his own. The final showdown came when J-Cat targeted the shadow world's highest-ranking member, a man known only as the Broker. The Broker had orchestrated countless deals, leveraging political favors and backdoor agreements that kept Washington under his thumb. He was the mastermind behind the shadow world's power, and J-Cat knew taking him down would be the death blow to their entire operation. J-Cat infiltrated the Broker's fortress-like estate, using every tool in his arsenal, the cloaking suit, the EMP devices, and even his Jaguar's advanced weaponry. He moved like a predator, always one step ahead of the Broker's private army. When J-Cat finally confronted the Broker, the old man was seated in a high-backed leather chair, calmly sipping a glass of whiskey as though he hadn't a care in the world. You've caused a lot of trouble, J-Cat, the Broker said, his voice smooth but laced with venom. But this is where it ends. You've bitten off more than you can chew. J-Cat stepped forward, his eyes cold and unwavering. No. This is where it ends for you. The Broker smiled, reaching for a button on his desk. But before he could press it, J-Cat was already on him. With a swift, practiced move, J-Cat disabled the Broker, leaving him powerless in his own fortress. You and your shadow world have had control for too long, J-Cat said, standing over the Broker. But not anymore. As J-Cat left, he detonated the EMP, shutting down the Broker's entire network. The shadow world was crippled. Its leaders were exposed, its resources drained. And Washington, for the first time in years, was free from their grip. J-Cat drove into the night, the lights of the city glowing in the distance. He knew there were still battles to fight, still enemies lurking in the dark. But for now, he had won. The shadow world had tried to bribe him, to control him. They didn't understand why he said no, why he didn't fold like all the others. But J-Cat wasn't like them. He didn't play by their rules. He played by his own. And that made him unstoppable. Washington, D.C. was a city of secrets. Behind the polished facade of political power, deals were made in dimly lit rooms, alliances were formed in whispered conversations, and the shadow world pulled the strings. For months, JCat had been unraveling their carefully woven web of influence and corruption, taking down key players one by one. Now, the shadow world was desperate, and they knew they had to stop him. They had tried to bribe him, tried to intimidate him, but JCat wasn't one to be swayed. So they changed tactics. The shadow world decided to exploit JCat's one known weakness, his love for beautiful women. The plan was simple. Send in high-class call girls, the best money could buy, to get close to him. They were to seduce him, gather information, and ultimately set him up for a deadly ambush. But what they didn't know was that JCat was always 2 steps ahead. It started at a lavish fundraiser in Georgetown. The elite of Washington's political class gathered in their designer suits and elegant gowns, the air thick with champagne and calculated smiles. JCat, looking effortlessly sharp in his custom-tailored tuxedo, was there under the guise of mingling with power brokers. But in reality, his eyes were always scanning the room, his instincts attuned to danger. It wasn't long before he noticed her, a stunning woman in a crimson dress, her dark eyes locked on him from across the room. She was beautiful, but something in her gaze held more than mere attraction. JCat knew the game. He'd played it before. She introduced herself as Eleanor, charming, sophisticated, with just the right amount of mystery. But JCat saw through the act. He could sense the trap, the invisible strings being pulled by those in the shadows. Eleanor wasn't the only one. Over the next few days, he encountered more women, each more stunning than the last, and all with the same objective. But JCat didn't let on. He played the game, his charm smooth as silk, his demeanor unshakable. He allowed the women to think they were getting close, let them believe they were seducing him. In truth, he was the one in control. One night, after a particularly intimate encounter with one of the women, named Cassandra, he finally made his move. They were alone in his penthouse, the city lights twinkling below. Cassandra had just finished pretending to leave the room, preparing to text her handler when JCat quietly approached her from behind. "Who sent you?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Cassandra froze, her phone still in hand. She turned slowly, meeting his eyes. For a moment, she considered lying, but there was something in JCat's gaze that told her it would be useless. "You know I can't tell you that," she replied, her voice wavering slightly. JCat's smile was disarming, but his eyes remained cold. "You don't have to. I already know. What I'm interested in is how much they're paying you to kill me." Her breath hitched. She hadn't expected him to be so blunt. "You're wrong," she tried, but her voice lacked conviction. JCat stepped closer, his presence commanding. "Here's the thing, Cassandra, you don't have to go through with it. You don't have to play their game. I can protect you, but only if you tell me everything." Cassandra hesitated, torn between loyalty to her employers and the undeniable pull JCat had over her. In the end, it wasn't his threats that swayed her, it was the promise of something different, something better than the life she was trapped in. "They hired us to get close to you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "They said it would be easy. They wanted us to find your weaknesses, then take you out." "Who's they?" JCat pressed. Cassandra swallowed hard, fear creeping into her eyes. "Donovan. He's running this. But there are others. More powerful than him." JCat nodded, his suspicions confirmed. The shadow world had been trying to take him down for weeks, but now they were playing a much more dangerous game. They had underestimated him, thinking he could be outsmarted by sending in women to distract him. What they didn't count on was his ability to turn the tables. "You're going to help me," JCat said, his voice softer now. "And in return, I'll make sure you walk away from this." Cassandra nodded slowly, understanding that her only chance of survival was to work with JCat. Over the next few days, he gathered information from her and the other women the shadow world had sent. One by one, they all cracked under the pressure of his charm and his unyielding resolve. Each woman revealed crucial pieces of the puzzle, the locations of secret meetings, the names of operatives, and the plans to eliminate him. With each revelation, JCat grew closer to dismantling the shadow world's operation for good. It all came to a head one stormy night in D.C. The shadow world had arranged a final confrontation, believing they could still outmaneuver JCat. But what they didn't know was that he had already turned their own agents against them. The women who were supposed to seduce and kill him had become his eyes and ears, feeding him information on every move the shadow world made. When Donovan and his team arrived at the secluded location where they planned to ambush J-Cat, they were met with an unexpected surprise. J-Cat was already there, waiting for them. "You really thought you could send women to take me out?" J-Cat asked, his voice dripping with amusement as he emerged from the shadows. Donovan's face twisted in shock and anger. "You were supposed to be dead by now." J-Cat smirked, his confidence unwavering. "You underestimated me. You thought I was just another mark, someone you could buy or distract. But you forgot one thing." "And what's that?" Donovan spat. "I don't play by your rules." With a swift, calculated strike, J-Cat took down Donovan and his team, dismantling their operation in one fell swoop. The Shadow World's control over Washington began to crumble, their secrets exposed, and their influence fading. As J-Cat drove through the city that night, the rain pouring down on the sleek roof of his Jaguar, he knew the battle wasn't over. The Shadow World would try again, in one form or another. But he wasn't worried. They had played their hand, and he had outplayed them. And as for the women they had sent to kill him, they had chosen a different path, one that didn't involve working for the Shadows. J-Cat had given them a way out, just as he had given Washington a fighting chance against the corruption that ran deep within its walls. The Shadow World had tried to use his love of beautiful women against him, but they had only succeeded in underestimating the man who played by his own rules. And J-Cat was far from finished. And that's a wrap on another thrilling episode of J-Cat Adventures. I hope you've been on the edge of your seat, caught up in the mystery, excitement, and danger that always follows J-Cat wherever he goes. From heart-pounding action to deep emotional connections, J-Cat's world never fails to surprise. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you never miss out on the next big adventure. Whether you're into romance, suspense, or mind-bending mysteries, there's always something more coming. And don't be shy, reach out. You can audio call or audio text chat with me directly by clicking on the Agent Hotline button. I'd love to know what you want to see next in J-Cat's world or hear your thoughts on today's episode. Want to dive deeper? Explore more of J-Cat's thrilling escapades by grabbing an ebook at Etsy or head over to Amazon for paperbacks and hard copies. Trust me, you'll want to have J-Cat's latest adventure right in your hands. And remember, the podcast continues across your favorite platforms: iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Wherever you go, J-Cat is right there, ready to bring you into his world of suspense, romance, and non-stop action. But it doesn't end here. This journey is just the beginning. Stay tuned for the next episode, where J-Cat takes on new challenges, faces dangerous foes, and maybe even finds love in unexpected places. Until next time, keep that spirit of adventure burning bright. The world is filled with endless possibilities, and J-Cat is proof that no mystery is too big to solve. Remember, click on the Agent Hotline and share your real-life spy story, and I'll work it into my next mission. I'll add my own commentary, throw in a little espionage flair, and make your story a part of the action. Because the next chapter of J-Cat Adventures is just around the corner.
He's the cat with the 9 lives, playing the game. A heart full of fire can't be tamed. In the shadows he roams, but he shines so bright. With every step he takes, he's doing it right. He's J-Cat, the name rings in every city.
Disclaimer: The Adventures of J-Cat is a work of fiction. The characters, events, and settings depicted in this series are the products of the author's imagination and are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. This series contains mature themes, including but not limited to romantic and erotic content, that may not be suitable for all audiences. Reader discretion is advised. The depictions of relationships, encounters, and situations are intended for entertainment purposes only and do not reflect real-life practices or endorse any specific behaviors. The portrayal of characters, including their actions and interactions, is intended to be a dramatic and fictional narrative. The series is not intended to promote or condone any form of violence, exploitation, or abuse. The character of J-Cat, while depicted as a hero in fictional scenarios, is a creation meant to entertain and should not be considered a role model for real-life behavior. Readers are reminded that this is a work of fiction and should enjoy it as such. Any interpretations or applications of the content within real-world contexts are the responsibility of the reader. The author and publishers disclaim any liability for actions taken by readers based on fictional portrayals and scenarios in the series. Notes J. Bahari, the imaginative mind behind the adventures of J-Cat, has a unique talent for weaving tales of mystery, romance, and adventure. With a flair for creating captivating characters and intricate plots, J. Bahari brings to life the dark and handsome playboy, J-Cat, whose escapades enthrall readers and leave them eagerly awaiting the next thrilling episode. J. Bahari's storytelling is enriched by a deep understanding of human nature and a keen eye for detail, crafting narratives that resonate with both excitement and emotional depth. Each episode of J-Cat's adventures is a testament to Bahari's ability to blend intrigue with passion, creating a world where the extraordinary becomes reality. In this creative journey, J. Bahari has harnessed the power of artificial intelligence to enhance the storytelling process. With the help of AI input, Bahari has been able to explore new dimensions of creativity, pushing the boundaries of conventional storytelling to deliver an experience that is both innovative and compelling. Together, J. Bahari and AI have crafted a series that not only entertains but also captivates the imagination, inviting readers into a world where seduction and suspense intertwine in the most alluring ways. This collaboration stands as a testament to the endless possibilities that arise when human creativity meets cutting-edge technology, forging a path to stories that are as mesmerizing as they are unforgettable.
Slick with the moves, ain't nothing here pretty. Soul in a digital age, Bahari's love breaking out of rage. Soul ambition breaking down the wall. 60 years deep, but his spirit is young. Every heart is strong. From the binary beats to the pixelated sky, soaring high, he's on.